Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? All right, Saints moved to 2-0 in the preseason. They beat the LA Chargers 22-17. Saints got up in the ball game. It was actually pretty exciting to watch them go up 7-0, then 10-3. The Chargers would come back to tie it. The Saints would extend their lead, get all the way up to 22-10. They would allow a late touchdown and then hold on for the win, 22-17. The result, of course, is less consequential than how you got to the result, because the preseason games are largely about roster spots 51, 52, 53. So you look at the spots where you're looking at position battles and guys who might emerge in those position battles over the course of a preseason game. So a couple of takeaways. There were obviously very few starters in this ball game for New Orleans. When you looked out there, it was pretty obvious. Trevor Penning was out there because he needs reps at left tackle. Alontae Taylor, Bradley Roby, some of those guys were out there. But there was no Carr. There was no Michael Thomas. There was none of the starting offensive line otherwise. There was no Chris Olave. There was no Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May, Marshawn Lattimore. There was no Demario Davis. Your best players weren't out there. You were starting with your twos. So I know so much of the conversation after the game yesterday was about all the penalties. I largely am unmoved by that. I remember there was a game under Sean Payton, a preseason game where the Saints played the Titans, and the Saints had 22 penalties, something like that, in the preseason game against the Titans. I'm unmoved by it. It's just not reflective. You could look at the Saints. They're, as an organization, one of the more disciplined teams in the league. You just don't see them really in these flag-happy football games, generally speaking. So, whenever you look and you see, Storm Norton with a holding, or Brian Edwards negated 2 touchdowns, yeah, that sucks, but Brian Edwards probably isn't going to make this football team. Storm Norton's not going to make this football team. So I'm less concerned with the penalties. I'll tell you the things that I liked on Sunday. I liked the fact that you had a sequence where draft picks that we have been waiting to see what they could do sequentially did really good things. Peyton Turner comes up with the strip sack. Brian Brzee recovers the fumble. On the ensuing drive, deep pass down the left sideline to Kendre Miller, and then Miller comes up with the 7-yard touchdown run. So we've been waiting for Peyton Turner to emerge. Now, it was against backups, but he stormed through there and made a play, strip sack. Brian Brezee's a guy who was awful quiet. Remember, Brzee and Foskey did not record a stat in the first preseason game. So for Brzee to be in on that play was encouraging, to see him come up with the fumble recovery after the Peyton Turner forced fumble. And then Kendre Miller. Look, Kendre Miller had a pretty quiet week 1 of the preseason and hurt his knee. And we were having this conversation a week ago today. Is Kendre Miller going to be available for the opener? Look, that in part necessitated, now obviously with the other injury, but with Benjamin, necessitated the Saints going to sign Darrell Williams. But one of the things we talked about when Kendre Miller was drafted was the fact that TCU did not use him as a pass catcher. As a junior, freshman, they had 1 reception. Sophomore, 12. Junior, 16. Kendre Miller, in 3 years at TCU, had 29 receptions. The most he had in a season was 16. So it's not to say he couldn't. We just didn't know if he could. Well, the wheel route he ran, the full extension catch he made to get down inside the 10-yard line was a beautiful reception. He looked like a receiver on the play. So hat tip to Kendre Miller there. And then the power run to get in the end zone a play later was pretty awesome. To see your draft capital at work there was really encouraging. So love to see that from those guys. Jalen Smith, someone else I'll tell you that was really encouraging. Jalen Smith you signed him very obviously to be your third linebacker. You've got Demario Davis and Pete Werner, and Jalen Smith's a guy that was super productive when he came into the league with Dallas. Of course, he kind of had the quote-unquote red shirt year coming off the awful knee injury against Ohio State in that Fiesta Bowl with Notre Dame. But once he was healthy again, it was just he was a 100 tackle machine for Dallas. And he's only 28 years old. So love the addition of Jalen Smith. He had 3 tackles in the ball game and had a pass breakup, batted down a pass at the line of scrimmage, got in the passing lane and knocked one down. You can just tell that Jalen Smith is different than the other cats out there. He looks different. It's not just the predator hair coming out the back of the helmet. He flies around. He's good in run support. He can obviously turn and cover. This is a guy that was a top 10 talent in the draft when he was coming out of Notre Dame. Still has tread on the tire, and that was great to see as well. The one guy that I think everyone is going to talk about today is Nico Lalos. He led the Saints with 5 tackles. He had 3 sacks in the ball game and 4 TFLs. So you have a day like that, and the obvious question is, can you keep that guy? And, this is a guy who is in his second season out of Dartmouth. Little undersized. He's 6'5", 270. And they have him listed as a D-end. And you would love, if he was performing like that, let's say third preseason game comes and he has a similar game like that, right? You would love to find a spot for that guy, but where do you do it at that position? At defensive end. Keep in mind, Carl Granderson's your starter, opposite Cam Jordan. You know that much. Tano Passanio is going to make the team. He had a pass breakup at the line of scrimmage. He's 6'7", got his hands in the air, knocked one down. That's what he's done his entire career since he's been in the league. Heck, he's great at blocking field goals because he's like putting a ladder right over the center just with his hands up. You kick it low, dude's going to get it. So, you've got Jordan, Granderson, Passanio, and you drafted Isaiah Foskey. That's 4 defensive ends. Do you have room for a 5th, especially when you look at Saunders and Shepard on the interior with BREC as well, who you drafted? I mean, how many... This is the interesting question and why I'm always fascinated by roster spots 51, 52, 53. Because how can you look at through 2 preseason games so far in camp, how can you look at a guy like A.T. Perry and go, yeah, we don't have room? Of course you're keeping A.T. Perry. It is so abundantly clear that guy is a Sunday player. He is an NFL receiver. But you got Michael Thomas, you got Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed's going to make the team. So that's 3 that you feel like for sure going to make the team. They love Tre'Quan. We'll see if they keep him around. If that's the case, you got 1 roster spot left. Well, it's A.T. Perry. Well, what do you do with the rest of your receivers who are performing? Do you keep a 6th? Is it someone that can help you on special teams? And if you keep them, then do you have room for a 4th tight end? The whole Jimmy Graham conversation is something we have to talk about as well with Jimmy Graham's arrest and his whatever medical condition he had. I know it was reported that he had a seizure and was disoriented as a result, but where do you have room? Where do you cut if you're going to keep a 3rd quarterback on the roster with Jake Haener? If you're going to keep a 4th tight end on the roster with Jimmy Graham, how are you going to be able to justify keeping an extra defensive end? So that's where when they're sitting down, putting the roster together and trying to get their best 53, how does it look? Find me a spot for Nico Lalos. After that, would you love to keep the guy? Sure. But who do you cut in order to keep him? To keep an extra defensive end who probably is never going to get on the field given the guys you have. I mean, you hope that he's a guy that you can cut, sign to the practice squad, and if you have an injury, you sign him to your 53. And that may be a realistic scenario for him. But keeping him on the 53, I'm not sure I know how that works out. Dennis Allen, after the game, talked about a few of these things. Talking about the receivers, what about Shaq Davis? Shaq Davis just keeps making plays out there. Here was Dennis Allen. Let's start with Jalen Smith. Here was Dennis Allen on the job Jalen Smith did in his first preseason game with the Saints.
He made a heck of a play on the third down, out route to the tight end. He's basically man-to-man coverage there. So that's the one play that kind of stands out to me a little bit. I'll have to go back and look at the tape, to see exactly how he played. But it looked like he was flying around out there, so it was fun to watch.
So I mentioned Jalen Smith was a takeaway. We talked about the draft capital, right? Peyton Turner with the strip sack, and then Kendre Miller with the touchdown. First, here's Dennis Allen's thoughts on former first-round pick Peyton Turner through 2 preseason games.
That's kind of the stuff that we've seen him doing in training camp, and that's why we drafted him where we did. And I think here's a kid that, has had a lot of injury issues, which has forced him to miss a lot of time, and so therefore he's missed a ton of development. And so it's been an unfair assessment of the player up to this point. But I do think he's had a good camp, and I do think he made some nice plays today.
That's a guy that you need to perform at that level. You put Trevor Penning and Peyton Turner in the same bucket. Those are guys you invested tremendous draft capital in as a first-round pick, and you need them to play to that. First-rounders need to be starters in the NFL. You need Trevor Penning to be your starting left tackle. You need Peyton Turner. If he's not going to start, if Granderson's got that job, you need him to back up Carl Granderson and be a guy that's part of that rotation and be an impactful part of that rotation. As for Kendre Miller, he flashed the thing we were all waiting to see. How does he look in pass protection and in the passing game?
Yeah, look, he's getting better at all that stuff. He had a nice protection the other day in the practices too, So I mean, look, each day he continues to get a little bit better. Obviously, we've got to keep him healthy and keep him out there and get those reps. But you can see the talent level. He's a talented player, and so that's what we're excited about.
All right, that is Dennis Allen as the Saints beat the Chargers. There will be no joint practices this week with the Texans. That was supposed to happen. D'Amico Ryans, the Texans head coach, said his team's too banged up. They're not interested in doing joint practices, so the two teams agreed to call off the joint practices, but they will play this weekend, the third preseason game in the Superdome. It'll be the Saints and the Texans for the final tune-up, sort of walkthrough in 6 days. So on Saturday, we'll see the Saints and the Texans in the Dome for the final preseason game, but no joint workouts this week. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.